Okay, so we're starting this episode pretty hot, mostly because I had to wear this shirt due to the subject matter that I will be talking about today. If you see this shirt that I'm wearing and it is not something that you agree with, just leave. It's fine. I have questions about what you feel is okay, but just leave. Since I'm coming in hot and wearing this shirt was created by this delightful trans creator. If you want prints of this shirt or this shirt in general, please order specifically from this person. So much of their art that they made in this fashion was taken from them and is just put up on Redbubble by whoever can grab their images. So by all means, please support a trans individual this Pride Month. Okay, now that they're gone, hi everybody! I'm Stalwart Ursa, this is my channel, thank you so much for watching. You guys know I talk about very good fandom things and a lot of Magic the Gathering because I'm a huge nerd. Really, I tend to just talk about on this channel whatever I feel very drawn to that time period. Right now, it's June 2023, it's Pride, and I decided I'm going to talk about the queer characters in Magic the Gathering. Because we know about a few of them because they are in prominent story positions, but there just is actually a decent amount of queer characters. And today, we're talking about trans and non-binary characters. Some of, honestly, the coolest designs that Magic has. Unlike my Nissa and Chandra video, which I started out with, check that out if you haven't. It's pretty great. You get a lot of the cheeseman on Magic's kind of couple of the hour right now. They are very important to the current canon and current storyline of Magic. Check out that video. It's great. It's a little bundle of love, just like this one. But unfortunately, these trans and non-binary characters, unlike Chandra and Nissa, don't have a ton of stories with them. Not yet, anyway. So there's Planeswalkers, which are the kind of main characters, quote unquote, characters that are able to planeswalk, to leave their realm, their plane, and go to another plane. So planeswalkers typically will have a little bit more story, just because stories do tend to hinge on what the planeswalkers are doing. But these other characters who are just people in their various planes, because we do visit various planes for various sets, are still important. They're cool, they're great, it's very fun to learn about them and how they interact with their plane, but they just oftentimes don't have a ton of history or story because they're made up for sets. And it's fine, but these characters are still cool, so I still want to point them out and talk about them with what information we have. Another disclaimer at the top here, Magic the Gathering has been around for just over 30 years now, so these characters, while great, some of them are going to be products of their time, so you are going to get, the tragedy of the queer that ultimately ends up dying, or, you're going to get the queer characters that are written more to be like the villains or ambiguously villainous. That's just product of its time. Just giving that a heads up right now. We understand that, we acknowledge that, but we still then also have to acknowledge their queerness. Okay, now we can talk about these characters. First on the list, I definitely feel like I should bring up is we're gonna go with one of the darker presentations of a queer character, and then we're gonna go with a lighter presentation of a queer character. So, by that means, let's talk about Xantcha, Sleeper Agent. Xantcha was someone who came from the plane of Dominaria, as is the case with a lot of early Magic the Gathering. Dominaria was very important for a lot of early Magic. It is a huge plane where just a ton of stories ended up happening. But Xantcha was very important because Xantcha was one of the Phyrexians, one of the original Phyrexians, actually. Phyrexians are a kind of robotic-based race that can be vat-born, which means they are just created as Phyrexians, and they've always just been Phyrexians, or they can be made a la kind of like the Borg, where they can turn somebody, and they are now Phyrexian/Borg. So, Xantcha was vat-born, but Xantcha was vat-born without a gender, specifically to be able to be used by their creator, Gix, to be implanted into Dominarian society, to be able to be a sleeper agent, an undercover agent, to give information of what the Dominarian people were doing, of wherever Xantcha was placed, and can give reports on how to, disrupt and cause chaos to these people's lives. However, what Gix wasn't expecting was that Zansha, amongst being around people, specifically humans, Zansha started getting a sense of self and a sense of community. And so Zansha, to shed her ties of Gix and her creator's plans, began presenting as female and felt comfortable doing so and was joyful in doing so. And by doing that, then also aligned herself with Urza. Urza was one of the two very problematic brothers who caused a lot of issues for Dominaria because they both had big boy plans and conflicted with one another, and that caused a whole big riff that has a lot of story to it. Nevertheless, Zansha, having claimed her own gender identity and her own story, sided with Urza and then ultimately, unfortunately, sacrifices herself to protect him. So while this does end up with a queer sacrificing herself for a cis man, she's still pretty great in that she chose her gender and she chose her presentation despite what she was created or intended for. So that makes her a cool queer character. Still a little tragic though. We are then going to flip from Zansha to Alesha, who smiles at death. Alesha hails from the plane of Tarkir. Tarkir is a plane that's known for warring factions and different clans, trying to continuously get power over one another, constantly rotating who has what power and who has what areas. But on top of all of that, they also have to live with dragons. Tarkir is just full of dragons. And so Alesha comes from the Mardu clan. Eventually, Alesha actually becomes the Khan of the Mardu clan, the leader. However, when we are first introduced to her, we see that she is the Khan, but we get a story called The Truth of Names. And in the story, The Truth of Names, we actually see from Alesha's perspective the struggles that she went through as a young warrior at 16 years of age. Everyone saw her as a boy when she knew that she wasn't. And in the Mardu, if you are able to slay your first dragon, you get to choose your war name. And Alesha was able to do that. She slain her first dragon, and she chose her war name. And her war name was Alesha, the name of her grandmother. And without a beat, the current Khan at that time accepted her as Alesha, and so too did the rest of the clan. And then, years after that, Alesha became Khan. And that's truly just such a cool freaking story. She was constantly on the forefront of pushing her clan to be as great as they could be through the history of Tarkir that we hear about. This was hundreds of years ago in Tarkir history. But nevertheless, Alesha is a fantastic representation of a badass trans woman. And then, of course, we actually see in recent years, we got another character who was inspired by her, the Death Greeter's Champion. This was announced this year, trans masculine person. Unfortunately, we don't have a name for this character as of yet, but the artist has actually gone through and discussed how they hired a trans mask model to help them and design this character for this card. And that's truly amazing. And then actually you can see, I'll put it up here on the screen, in the background of Death Greeter's Champion's art, you can actually see Alesha, an inspiration of Alesha, still here guiding this delightful trans mask warrior, which is, it's so good. It's so good. As an older queer, I guess, I'm not like an old guard queer, but as an older queer, I do be loving queer history. And queer Tarkirian history, so freaking cool. And as someone pointed out, it truly looks like they have still been using the same type of binders for hundreds of years. Which is quite hilarious, but honestly resembles our history. Binders haven't changed all too much throughout the years. So thanks, Magic. Shifting from Tarkir, we are going to go to the plane of Kaladesh, which clearly a lot of queer people come from Kaladesh. Kaladesh, home for the queers. Ding! Honestly, though, we are talking about, in this instance, Yeheni, the Undying Partisan. Yeheni is from a species known as the Aetherborn, a type of people that are made up of energy from across Kaladesh. It's kind of I don't want to say problematic, but it is kind of one of those things to where, like, you could argue that the entire species of Aetherborn are non-binary because they are specks of energy, but that's based on our own semblance of gender, so that's kind of a toss-up, honestly. But Yeheni themselves does not use the traditional binary gender. They do use they, them. They are a fantastic, vivacious character that joins up and makes friends with the Gatewatch during the Aether Revolt. They help them on their quest on Kaladesh at that time, and while their lifespan is too short, unfortunately, there have been hints of them possibly being reborn, but who knows? Either way, though, they are a cool-looking and fantastic non-binary character in Magic the Gathering, coming from, again, one of the queerest places on Magic. Kaladesh, man. God bless them. God bless them. A+. So leaving our vacation spot here on queer Kaladesh, we are going to head over to, not to a plane necessarily, but to the space between planes, where energy and the nebulous forms of nightmares and dreams come to live. And of course, I had to talk about Ashiok, the Nightmare Weaver. Ashiok is a planeswalker, so there will be a little bit more information about them, but not really, which honestly is what they would want, honestly. Ashiok is a being that is able to manipulate and gain power from, kind of messing with the dreams of individuals and causing nightmares to happen. That's what gives them their yum is is making people have terrible nightmares and messing with their perceptions of what's happening in their lives through their dreams. So Ashiok has had pretty substantial side influence to a lot of stories. So Ashiok was there when Elspeth was struggling on Theros last that she was on Theros. Anytime she's on Theros, she struggles. But Ashiok made it even worse by having Elspeth relive the aspects of possibly dying and seeing individuals that she cared about dying. And so they had this very interesting, very weird dance of, I know that you are very important and I know that you cause agony and therefore have agony yourself. So Ashiok is naturally drawn to the wreckage in Elspeth's wake. And Elspeth has just kind of started to try to deal with this, though they don't often know how to run into one another. So that's Ashiok with Elspeth. And then Ashiok has also, in finding the stuff that is connected to Elspeth and seeing that Elspeth as a warrior just naturally leaves wreckage in her wake, then found their way into the dreams of one Elish Norn, head praetor of the Phyrexians in the modern era. And Ashiok really got up in there and just scrambled Elish Norn's nightmares real good, understanding that Elish Norn knew of her enemies, and rather than making her overly paranoid about everything, made her distinctly paranoid of Elspeth, because Elspeth could be the hinge point that would bring her downfall. And so Elish Norn would do anything and everything to try and speed up the process of the Phyrexians taking over the greater multiverse, due to the nightmares that she was having thanks to Ashiok, which were tied in connection with Elspeth. And ultimately, as we have seen through March of the Machine, that did in fact end up happening. By speeding up the process and girl bossing too close to the sun thanks to her fears and her grip that she wanted to keep control over everything, Elspeth did show up, and Elspeth helped wreck her entire life and ultimately helped Karn end her life. That's honestly what Ashiok would have wanted. Ashiok is a being that we don't know too much of, but we do know that they are probably kicking their little feetsies and enjoying the fact that this has happened to Elish Norn because of the stuff that they implanted in Elish Norn's brain about Elspeth. Now we are coming into the next story set for Magic the Gathering is going to be something that has a big tie with Ashiok. We are going to the plane of Eldraine, the fairy tale plane that is still suffering from the effects of the March of the Machine. And many people have fallen into a deep, uncontrolled slumber. And this is a playground where this non-binary can play. And oof, oh, the nightmares they'll have. Reaping joy from chaos sounds like a non-binary trait to me. While we've been jumping around the planes and going to see these different aspects of these wonderful different characters, and we just got our first non-binary planeswalker on the list, let us jump back to, as always, where everything continues and ends and keeps going back. Let's head back to Dominaria, because that is another very queer plane, apparently. Going back to Dominaria, we see Halar, the Fire Fletcher. They are both a very good archer as well as a fire mage, so they tend to use the natural order of green and the powerful, passionate aspects of red as a Gruul, two-color green and red character. While not too much is known about Halar, we do know that Halar was very important for a couple of the Llanowar factions. We see and we are told that their birth heralded a connection point of peace between two clans, where a midwife who was a pretty high position in one clan ended up helping give birth to Halar, and then while having to take care of Halar's mother, passed Halar to another diplomat of another clan in the middle of this happened during like meetings of some sort. That diplomat also kind of bonded with everyone in that moment, and that became a bridge for peace. And Halar, now as a living symbol of that, kind of helps these two clans keep their peace through the years by simply being themselves. And truly, hinge point, that usually is something that a queer child or a queer individual does end up doing between families, found families, or friend groups. So, A+, Halar. Good job. Way to Gruul it up. Pivoting from Halar and the Llanowar elves, we are actually going to stay on Dominaria and go to the past, as a lot of things ultimately end up doing when you're talking about Dominaria. Back to the time of Zansha's era, during Urza and the Brothers' War, we're going to talk about Myrel, Shield of Argiv. Myrel was very important in that they were the right hand of Kayla bin Krug. Kayla bin Krug being the wife of Urza. So they were oftentimes at the forefront of trying to protect people of Pendragon from the different fallout that was happening during the war. And while we don't know too much about what they did and all of the things that they were ultimately fighting for and fighting to protect, we do know that they made an impact to the point to where the people of Dominaria still know of them today. So that's a win. Though I would like to know more about them. Done with Dominaria for now, let's leave and planeswalk over to Theros. Theros is a very Grecian-inspired plane, so here we actually meet, in terms of our story and who we are talking about, the queer and trans and non-binary characters of Magic, we meet Nico Eris. Nico Eris is our second planeswalker on this delightful little video, where they are truly just non-binary. We actually know a decent amount about them. They were raised from a very young age because of their like slender and athletic build to be a athlete. They were seen that their fate was going to be that they were going to be a great javelineer, and that was all that they were going to do. And so they were trained, and their life was revolving around the fact that that was what was foretold about their life. That a fortune seer, very Cassandra type, saw that this was their path and their lot in life. However, Nico, in doing that for as long as they did kind of started feeling a discontent with it. They liked the training, but they didn't just want to be an athlete. They wanted to be a hero. They wanted to go out and make an impact in the lives of people around them beyond just doing great feats of sport. So they threw that destiny to the side. During the events of Theros Beyond Death, we see a goddess come back from the underworld who is so intent on making individuals stay to their predestined lot in life. Their fates are set, and that's what they should be beholden to. So she sent out various warriors under her banner to go and find individuals who were not doing what their predestined stories were meant to. So one of the people went after Elspeth because Elspeth was coming back to life, and that was not supposed to happen, according to this goddess. And someone else went after Nico for betraying the fact that they were supposed to be a great athlete for Theros. And in that confrontation of struggling for their right to choose their own fate, Nico sparked and became a planeswalker. They then went to Kaldheim, where on Kaldheim, Kaldheim is kind of the Viking plane, if you would, for all intents and purposes, Viking Asgardian plane. Nico on Kaldheim ended up meeting with mystics there who were willing to take them under their wing, and they learned a lot more about their magic and the more magical aspects of their life. So now as a planeswalker, they tend to use mirror magic. They use shards of glass to be able to disillusion, entrap, and protect people as is their will. And on Kaldheim, they also ended up meeting one of the Gatewatch members, Kaya. In helping Kaya, they then in return were helped by Kaya and got a connection to the Gatewatch. They haven't done too much as of late, but hopefully they will be coming to the forefront. God, Nico's just such a cool character. I love them so much. There's a few more characters who are really in the non-binary umbrella, but even with what I have talked about for the people who I have currently talked about in this video, they don't have too much about them at all as of yet. But this is kind of just like a brief overview of non-binary and trans characters in Magic. And in doing the research to be able to talk about this, it does come to the forefront that like there are certainly a good number of non-binary characters, not so much trans characters, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that like we are getting there. I'm very excited. They are there and the potential is there. I just want to see that potential pushed even more. I want to see more trans feminine and trans masculine characters. I also want more non-binary characters. I want the non-binary characters that we have to get more story. I know Ashiok's definitely going to be getting more story, but I hope we get to see Nico more. I hope we see all of these characters in some aspect, even the ones that we've only seen in the past. We've gone back to the Brothers' War. Let's go back to Tarkir and see the past of Tarkir. I want to see more of Alesha. But still, these are some pretty amazing and important characters for different people, especially people who happen to be trans or non-binary. I know that in MagicCon Philadelphia, somebody actually cosplayed Myrelle and looked amazing. And they even, when they were asked, like, what was your inspiration for cosplaying this character, did flat out bring up the fact that Myrelle, as a non-binary person, was truly just listed and spoken about as a badass. It wasn't the fact that they were non-binary, which is also very important. We love, and as queer people, love to see stories of queer and non-binary and trans individuals who their worlds don't revolve around the fact that they're queer, trans, or non-binary. It just simply is and is simply accepted. And then they go off and do amazing things. Whether it is amazing wonderful or amazing terrible, they're still amazing and fantastical and full of magic. There is another individual that I would want to talk about on this topic, but I do have to do a little bit more research because there's a pretty decent essay that I want to read to be able to speak on it. So please be on the lookout for that. It's part of this series, but also is kind of going to be like its own one-shot spin-off of this series, but it will be released during the month of June. So be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, next Friday, we are going to be talking about Uh, of my side of the queer faction, we are going to be talking about the feminine sapphics of Magic the Gathering. Yep, we are talking about the women loving women in Magic, whether they be lesbian or pansexual. We are talking about the ladies loving ladies. It's going to be great. There's a large number of women loving women who are in Magic, and all of them are pretty freaking amazing. Did you enjoy this video? I appreciate if you did. Like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTubey things, and comment down below what you think of any of these characters. Are you interested in them? Do you want to put them in your decks? Do you want to just learn more about them? Please let me know. And that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate it. And definitely huge shout out if you are continuing to watch this after watching the first video. That first video has gotten a lot of love, and honestly, it does my queer little heart good to see. I wasn't too sure about doing this series, mostly because, frankly, a lot of Magic content doesn't do stuff like this in video essay form. But it seems to be doing well, and I'm glad people enjoy it. I've enjoyed doing the research, and I want to continue presenting this stuff to you guys. I'll see you next Friday.